Welcome to episode 99 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast of opinions made up by four allegedly intelligent-ish guys discussing our passion for Linux. My name is Noah, delighted to be here with you today. And joining me are my friends Michael. Hey, Michael.
Hello. I get to edit there.
And now you got more to do because you said something. And now you have more to do because I acknowledged it. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing better than Michael, apparently.
And last but not least, Zeb, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing really well. Thank you very much indeed.
Fantastic. So, Ryan, tell me a little bit about what you've been up to this week.
So obviously moving because everything's like gone here, but in between the chaos of moving, I was able to check out Valve's new game Artifact out there, which released 2 days ago now and had day one support for Linux out there. So I live streamed it the second it became available and had a lot of fun with that game. I lost in the tutorial twice. So I ended the stream when I finally won, but I also did something that I think you might find interesting, Noah, is I invested in Lightworks tutorials since our last discussion. And I have really enjoyed Lightworks. So I went out and got a pro license, even though I shouldn't be spending any money right now with the new house purchase coming. And I did that right after talking to their customer service because I was asking them about licensing issues with me distro hopping and all that stuff. And they're like, hey, don't worry about it. We got you, practically was their response, which was really cool. The one thing I will say that I ran into is in the license, it comes with Boris FX and Graffiti FX as kind of a perk. You buy the pro license, you also get these kind of bundled in. Well, I noticed there's no Linux version for those because they're separate. They're separate companies that make these packages. So I reached out to the Boris team and I asked them, hey, when's the Linux support coming? And they said, unfortunately, the FX and Graffiti programs do not have a Linux component, and unlikely there will be Linux versions of these programs. This is mainly because the FX Graffiti programs were made for a series of editing programs, the rest of which are exclusively Mac and Windows. So I just want to say shout out to Lightworks, not a shout out to the Boris FX team. You could do better out there in supporting Lightworks, who supports Linux, and have some support for your products out there.
Or you cannot do better and go to business. We don't care either way.
Yeah, there you go. Because all that adds is honestly effects you can already do in the program. It just makes them for you and you kind of throw them in there. So, I mean, it's not a huge deal. It's just annoying because, you know, they should support Linux out there.
So how have you found the Lightworks experience? Have you found it to be, I mean, it's not intuitive. We all know that, but the tutorials have helped and you've been able to get it done?
Yeah, what I did is I spent, you know, probably a total of maybe 6 hours watching videos over days, just learning, watching their videos on their site and then other videos and then just playing along with it. After that time, and to me, honestly, it's very intuitive. They're original. When I played with Lightworks back in the day and they kind of had that operating system like desktop feel, that was not good. This new one, once you kind of figure out how they've laid it out, to me, it's very intuitive. It is not difficult to learn at all. I was able to do text effects. I was able to do overlays. I was able to do, obviously, cuts and effects like slow down and speed up and all of that stuff almost immediately. And I actually love the two-pane camera system where you can edit and mark in on the clips that you're working on. And then you also have your main edit window over on the right. I think it's actually very intuitive now. They've done a fantastic job with it. I'm a believer.
You like the rework. Okay. That's very cool. Well, good for you. It would be interesting to follow that discussion, follow your path as that goes on. Michael, tell me a little bit. I know you weren't feeling so great. Are you feeling any better?
I feel much better, like 95% better. I still have a little bit of like something, I don't know, but I'm mostly fine. But I've been using my time while I've been sick and not to work on a bunch of things. And one of the things is to streamline the production of both this show and This Week in Linux. And I've made it where it takes usually from my editing of each episode about 2 to 3 hours a piece. I've actually streamlined it so that This Week in Linux takes me about 30 minutes and this show takes about an hour. And the more I can work on it, I'm going to make it where, like last episode, it was relatively on time. I mean, for the most part, it was, but it was kind of like an hour or two out of the time I wanted to, but it was close. The next one, on time. Yeah. So lots of things I'm doing. And actually, we a couple episodes ago, we talked about this note app called Joplin. And I started just trying it this week, and to trying it more than just like occasional trying, but like porting all of my notes over to see how it handles it. And if you set up the sync structure, it's fantastic because like the mobile app and everything works, and like as soon as you push a new update, it will automatically update to the rest of the devices and stuff. Like, and it also works through WebDAV, so you can have it on a server that's not access to the public internet and still get access to it through WebDAV, and it works great. So I'm a big fan of that thing now.
That's really cool. And I'll just I know we give you a hard time, but the truth is that doing a podcast is about like 10 to 15 times more work than people see on the screen. For every hour of screen time that you see, you can assume that there's probably 2 to 4 hours of preparation, and then there's probably 2 to 4 hours of editing for that 1 hour of screen time. So Michael's doing both sides of that. So for every 1 hour that you see him on the screen, there's probably 8 hours of work that he's put in cumulatively of the show. And you're doing that for not one, but 2 shows. So just from one guy to another that knows what you're doing behind the scenes, just thank you very much. And to streamline that, that's really cool because you're going to help other podcasters out there if you're willing to share your methods, which I know you typically are.
For the most
part. Zeb, what kind of trouble have you gotten into?
Well, thankfully, not a lot this week. I've just been resting up the whole week, keeping an eye on social media, and keeping my ear to the ground in case my family's been trying to organise a 60th birthday party for tomorrow, Saturday, December the 1st. So thankfully, I've not heard anything happening, so I might be safe.
You're turning 60 tomorrow?
Yep. And a friend of mine at work made me this Linux 60, not 6.0, 60 shirt.
Nice.
And that's not a TM, that's my initials. But he actually made this, and he didn't know whether he'd got a retro penguin. I said, nope, that's Tux. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Cool. Well, happy birthday, man.
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
Happy birthday. So, Ryan, what great things have people said about you this week in the email?
All kinds of great things, except this email, actually, because it starts out, hello, gentlemen. Used loosely, of course, in Ryan's case, ! What is that supposed to mean? You know what? Get this email. We're not even reading it. No, I'm kidding. All right. No, it's a pretty good email. So it says, quick, funny story. This past Saturday, I was trying to get some work done. My kids, Ben, 8, and Eileen, 6, were complaining for the upteenth time that day about how bored they were. Anybody who has kids, they can relate to that story. I certainly can. The weather was lousy. It's been snowing constantly since before Halloween here in Vermont, and they had early onset cabin fever. In desperation, I said, why don't you guys draw some pictures of Tux and Geeko making a snowman so I can use them as my wallpaper? I run OpenSUSE Tumbleweed on my laptop. My son Ben immediately yells out, the guys at Destination Linux would love that. My jaw dropped,
awesome.
And I said, how do you know about Destination Linux? So apparently we're making it around the schools right now. We're the new hip thing out there. And he said, come on, Dad, you're always listening to it when you're in the car. So just so you know, you're podcast famous with 6 to 8-year-olds. That's exactly the target market we're going after, which is awesome.
Perfect.
He's attaching masterpieces created by Ben and Aline, which were, by the way, awesome. We downloaded them immediately. We've told Michael to get them on the website. They are so well done, so cute.
Already set it up. It's going to be on the show notes when we post this.
Yeah, so he says, seriously, though, I'd like to express my gratitude for the show and all the work you put into it. I've been a listener since the beginning days with Rocco and Rob, and no matter who's at the helm, it's always been a real pleasure and great fun to listen to the unique perspectives that each host and guest has brought to the table. So I'll be signing up today at the almost free level to lend a small measure of support for your future activities. Keep up the great work. You have many fans like me who, though silent, nonetheless enjoy and benefit from your efforts very much. Sincerely, Eileen and Bill and Ben. So thank you very, very, very much for this email. Thank you for the artwork. And it's awesome to know that people are out there raising their kids right on Linux and Destination Linux podcast.
Absolutely.
I know you were kind of joking, but the truth is we do try to keep the show family friendly. So he's jesting when he says that, it's our target audience per se, but it's certainly not something that we have jettisoned the idea that there is a younger generation that needs to be on Linux, should be on Linux. We want them to be on Linux, and we want to be a part of that. Yeah, absolutely. And so the content is absolutely structured so that people of all ages can listen.
Yeah, we've taken into consideration.
Absolutely. And who's going to be building the next versions of Linux, if not for the Eileens and Bens of this world?
Yep, who's going to build 61?
Exactly. There you go.
So don't forget, keep sending us these emails. We love reading them out on how you use Linux. Send us an email to comments@destinationlinux.org.
Our first story this week is VyOS 1.2.0 release candidate 9 has been released. Now, VyOS is an appliance-based distro that is specifically designed for firewall, routing, and VPN. And this is one of those distros that they've come into their own in the last couple of years. For the longest time, anytime we talked about routers, firewalls, or essentially edge devices, we talked about them as appliances devices that you would purchase from the store, like Linksys or Cisco or any of those. And what you found is that a lot of people started flashing alternative operating systems onto those devices, and that eventually evolved into x86 and ARM devices where you would install an operating system from scratch. Well, VyOS is exactly that. It is an operating system that you can install on either ARM or x86, and it focuses on being an enterprise-level router. So it's comparable to Cisco IOS, Juniper OS, rather than the small home office routers like Linksys or D-Link. So it's great because you have the ability to spin it up inside of a virtual environment like VirtualBox or your chosen hypervisor, and you can play with it a little bit and kind of get some experience before you actually put it in a production environment. The advantage is when you decide to actually take the next step and go into a production environment, you can install it on a Dell R710 that has a bunch of 10 gig network cards in it, and you can put it into a production environment and scale up that infrastructure that you built at your house for free. And of course, the user interface and all of the commands and all of those things will stay consistent. You just put it on more powerful hardware. So the VyOS 1.2.0 is shipping with, looks like, kernel 4.19.4. Mm-hmm. They have included things like a PPOE server, so you can implement your own VPN and things like that. It looks like a really cool project. I personally have not played with VyOS. I've played with alternatives to it, but it is definitely on the docket for testing. And of course, if it performs well enough, we would absolutely put it into production at my small business.
Yeah, I mean, it's to be clear to people, it's one of those things that's meant for enterprise routers, not really for like the home router. But there are options for home router as well, like WRT or OpenWRT. I mean, but this is really cool because they also do this. And I think this one of the things that's really cool about it is that they have the two different branch styles. So they release in a rolling release as well as a long-term support release model. And it's a really cool approach because that way, if you want to have maybe your client would be on the long-term support release, but your infrastructure would be on the rolling release if you wanted to test out more things like that. So it's pretty cool that they're doing that.
Well, even if it's meant for enterprise, like it can replace enterprise, you could still use this as a home router. I mean, the concepts are still the same, right? I really like the idea of installing this in a virtual box first, though. I hadn't even thought of that. That's a quick way to get in there and start playing with it.
So not only can you install it and play with it in there, but there is actually a large trend in the IT industry of virtualizing edge devices. So what you'll do is you'll just pass through a network card and run your router inside of a virtual appliance. The advantage there, of course, is should something get corrupt or when you make a software change or an update or whatever it is, if that virtual machine goes down or something crashes or breaks, you can try a different configuration. And if it doesn't work, you just pass those network cards back to the old version or the other VM. And now you're back online.
That is awesome.
Yeah, the flexibility and the scalability and the redundancy is there for enterprise. So you wouldn't even have to necessarily put it on dedicated hardware. In fact, if it were me, I would not. I would virtualize it.
Nice. Never thought of that. That sounds like a fun weekend project to me.
Okay, so moving on to another piece of information that came through to us this week is that after the release of Fedora 30, whenever that might happen, there could potentially be a slight delay before Fedora 31 comes out. And now, before you all go thinking, oh, woe is me, this is IBM jumping in there and they're going to start messing around with things. No, this has always been on the cards. And the reason for the possible delay is they are going to restructure the way that Fedora is developed to rely more upon automated testing, improving the release process and making the infrastructure more scalable. Now, to accomplish all of this, they may leave Fedora 30 in place for a while, perhaps even a year. Now, my understanding is that they normally release every 6 months-ish.
It's
that about
it's
right?
like 6 to 10 months depending on the thing, because they usually
Yeah.
they aim for 6 months,
Right.
but it's usually around 8.
hmm
Yeah.
So this is just them, as I say, giving you a heads up. Don't panic. It's nothing to do with IBM. They had it planned all along. So I'm not sure that any of us use Fedora as our daily drivers.
I have been using it for not as a daily driver for a while. I did there, as you guys know, and like Fedora, I do think this is. It depends, of course, on how it comes out at the end of the day, but I think this is a really good time for them to kind of stop and retool and put in some of the tools that they've been working on, like the automated testing infrastructure, but also in the scalability and possibly even working on making Fedora even more approachable than it is today. I think those would be, I think it would be a good thing to spend the time doing that at this juncture, and sitting on Fedora 30 while most of us want that new shiny release every 6 to 10 months. In order to do this is probably a good stopping point for a minute for them to take a year to kind of do some of this retooling and make it easier for their developers to be able to work on, instead of spending all their time working on little bugs and things like that, retooling it so it's easier to and faster for them to find these issues, more modular so they can plug some of the new stuff in. And of course, having the automated testing there with less oversight is going to certainly speed things up. So you kind of pause at Fedora 30 and then you probably go super fast. Not like they're going to release faster, but you go super fast in the gains that you'll get from Fedora from there forward.
Yeah, they also said
Yeah,
Matthew
but
Miller
I
said
mean-
that he was going to that they're to be clear about it. They're not like saying that this is a done deal, that they're going to do this. This is more like they're just discussing it at the moment, and that there's like a lot of potential that it will happen, but they don't know yet because they have to decide. Like the Fedora Council has to decide about what they want to do with it. But it's really interesting because when Matthew Miller was describing how the tooling system works, they essentially are compiling everything all at once. And so, like, if you change something in a big stack, it'll compile the whole thing, like the whole ISO entirely, and test everything. And that takes like 12 hours to do. So they said that if they change enough, they will sometimes will have to wait a whole day before they can, or depending on when they do it, they have to test it and try it out. So this retooling would basically, like, the goal is to get it down to about 4 hours per testing. And then they said that it's potential that they might get it to 2. Like that's the dream that some of them have said that they could probably get it down there to. But he was saying that 4 hours is probably like a sweet spot, because at least you could do it a couple times a day and not have to worry about waiting so much. So I mean it's probably something they probably should do, just because of like how much of a hassle they had to deal with as far as like testing the final releases before they put them out. And if they take a year to do this, I don't think it'd be that big of an issue. Essentially, especially if they keep Fedora 30 updated a lot, because since it's cutting edge, they would have to do that a lot more. But it would be interesting to see if GNOME also stops with the Fedora 30, or they try to roll that before 31 comes out, because they usually just roll the next version of GNOME is in the next version of Fedora. So if they were to try to like do like a release point like halfway through to make 30.1 or 0.5 or something, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens there, but I think this is probably a good idea. Also, something that's probably a good idea, that's to revert the patches that we were talked about last week about the performance killing kernel patches. And last week we discussed these issues with the Spectre patches, and it had an issue of impacting certain types of processes up to 50% speed degradation. And that they've decided that their Greg KH has released maintenance patches to kernel 4.19.4 and 4.14.83, which reverts the performance killing STIBP, or the single thread indirect branch predictors. That's fun to say. That has been backported from 420. So it's actually pretty good, because this is an interesting approach, because there is still an issue that exists, but they're going to do it in the sense of like the people who need it could turn it on, and the people who are not likely to need it could just leave it off. So by default, they're going to leave it off. That's an interesting approach, and I think that this is the best way, because it's kind of, the attack vector is so small, it probably isn't worth the performance degradation to push it out to everyone anyway.
Not at 50%. I mean, at that point, you're losing so much. Isn't the best solution here, though, just going to AMD, Michael?
No.
Wow, I wonder who wrote that.
Well, okay. To be clear, maybe. I don't know. This particular Spectre issue, I'm not sure if it affects AMD or not. Some Spectre issues do affect AMD, but not all of them.
With this one, does it not require physical access to the machine?
I'm pretty sure this one does.
Yeah. So again, like you said it eloquently. The attack vector is so small. Why would you not just say, "Hey, listen, if I'm the only one that has physical access to my machine, don't chop my processor in half, please."
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, in most cases, I mean, like as far as the consumers, more than likely won't have to worry about it. But maybe, like for example, like big companies might be a target where people could go to their lobby and try to affect them in some way. Something like that they might be able to do it. Because like if you can get into the network, it should be possible depending on the attack for the like what all patches have been applied to that company's infrastructure, because there's some patches that you can do prediction and kind of jump across the network and stuff. So it's definitely an issue that needs to be addressed, but for most people and most consumers and stuff, it's not really that big a deal. So I don't think it's that much of a problem for it not to be on, and it definitely not worth 50% performance hit. So
I'm glad they rolled it back. I think it was the right move, and you have it there to turn back on if you are in a situation where you need super security in there and can't take the risk. Yeah. But for everybody else, you're good to go.
Yeah, and also AMD would be a better option for sure, because you don't get meltdown that way at least.
Yeah.
And I'd love to have read the email, because apparently Linus complained about it. So
he was very.
He used his new, nice, cuddly, friendly language.
It wasn't cuddly, but it was much more polite.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of blank spots everywhere, so we don't know what was said in between those. No, that's not true. No, it was a very nice email, but it was also very forceful in the fact that we can't have this kind of performance hit on Linux, and I think it's fair. So another program that hit the news that I absolutely love, and let me tell you something, sometimes we talk about these releases and they're just little things that they change. This is a massive update to a program I absolutely adore. And in fact, funny enough, if you are not in the Lightworks camp, or you don't like that, you don't like Kden Live, it also works as a video editor, which a lot of people don't know that part about it. It's a very robust program called Blender. Blender 2.80 beta is now available right before Christmas, which is a awesome Christmas gift to people like my brother who develop games utilizing Blender. They don't use it as an engine, but they use it as their 3D modeling tool. But it actually is a game engine too. This tool is ridiculous. By the way. Yeah. It's very powerful and robust. You can use it for game development, video editing, 3D modeling, and it's got a ton of awesome features in here. They've got user interface improvements with dark themes and flat icons, which is not a big deal, but settings are more consistent, which is something that's been needed. Again, think about all the things this tool does. You've got to have that organization for the settings and tools, and they've improved the menus. This is the best one, though. Left click is now your select. So if you've ever used Blender, the most annoying thing is if you want to highlight something, it's right click instead of left click. I don't know why they did that.
Yeah.
For those who like that right click thing, you can set it back to it. It's a setting in there, but now it's defaulted to left click. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is this going to be the new single click, double click?
No, this one's everyone hated it. People who are Blender fans hated that part. There's actually like Blender is a fantastic tool. I actually used it for video editing for a while, but it is really robust, and at the same time that's a negative to a lot of people, because it takes a lot of effort to learn different features. Like if you're learning the 3D modeling, you know nothing of the video editing stuff, because the functionality is completely different, because it has a mode changing. So once you change the mode, everything changes, the interface, the shortcuts, everything. So this is great that they're doing the interface consistency, mainly because it needs it.
No, I was going to say one of the things that changed too is the tool system on the sidebar. When Michael was talking about when you would switch to video editing mode, a lot of the tools would still be more relevant to 3D animation and stuff. Well, now they've switched that. When you switch the modes, it switches the tool set exactly what it should be doing. This was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, and it's been around for a while.
The thing I've always appreciated about Blender is it's one of those tools that exists that really have a competitive advantage against all of its competition, platform agnostic, right? When you look at Blender as compared to any and what's it, her modeling software, I guess.
Yeah.
Animation rendering modeling software that you would have on any other platform. Blender can hold its own and is in fact used industry wide for that. And we just have to be lucky enough that those talented developers were willing to do that as open source.
Yeah, I mean the crazy thing is that when they first started Blender, it wasn't meant to be open, and then because they started in the '80s, if you're not aware, it's been around for a long time, and they started as a product, and then after they were using it as software for an industry like modeling industry and like Hollywood and stuff, the guy who developed it decided to buy out the company, and then he just decided to just open source it. And he didn't even, the term open source didn't exist at the time when he did it. It was just he just wanted to make it where more people could be contributing to it. So he just kind of gave the source out and gave it a license that was like, yeah, whatever. And then eventually they changed it to like a legitimate license and then when the open source was created, they adopted that. And it's really good because it shows the longevity of a project can be like, can be sustained with open source and not just like the Linux kernel being like one of the biggest or the biggest open source project, like all kinds of different things, including a modeler, video editor, and things like that could be, you could get benefits from that. And there's even some people who are making a feature-length movie, like CGI driven entirely by Blender right now. So it'll be pretty cool. They haven't said when it's going to be launched, but I think it's sometime late next year, maybe, or maybe the year after. They haven't really given a date, but it's fairly soon, considering how much work goes into a movie like that. But Blender has been working on this version for like at least a year and a half, 2 years, and there's been a lot of people who are like just waiting for this to happen because so much new stuff are coming into it. And like so the graphics engine is being fixed, like they're fixing performance heavily, like all kinds of stuff. And the probably the best thing is that they're making the functionality of different things kind of make more sense, because there's actually videos and press conferences at BlendCon, which is like the Blender conference, where a guy was talking about how he loves Blender. And he's like, and if you don't understand how Blender works, it's really easy. I'll show you. If you want to do this one thing, then he goes through like this 5-step process to get to it. And it's like, yeah, see how easy that is? It's great. It's the best thing ever.
Yeah, well, they've done a huge job to improve here, and this 1 year has paid off. They also added 2D animation, which you could technically kind of do in Blender before, but now they've made it a thing, and unlimited layers. So now you're not limited to just 20 layers like you were before. And you talked about speed, Michael, 30% faster rendering now than before. I think, and you know what I loved about this project is when they talk about it, when they release their videos talking about it, they're excited. The developers are literally so excited. You can hear it in their voice. This is a labor of love, and it shows. And Blender's a complex program. I suggest picking up a book on it. Kind of like a Lightworks, you're going to want to do a little bit of research before you dive in. But once you learn it, it's limitless. You want to create intros to your videos. You want to model 3D characters. You want to do art. You want to do all of this stuff, video editing, it's all there within Blender. It's such a cool tool. I'm so happy for them and can't wait to check it out myself and play with it a little bit.
Yeah, nice. They have the 20th century, 20th century Fox little animation thing. You can change the text and then render it. So if you just want to get started, it's pretty simple. But to dig into and do anything powerful with it, it's going to take some time.
Yep. So what's up in the mobile world there, Noah?
Is it Necuno? Is that how we pronounce it?
You have to ask Michael.
Michael, how do we pronounce this? Necuno Solutions.
This one I would be guessing too, so I don't know.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna say I'm naming them. It's Necuno Solutions. If that's wrong, then now they've learned how to pronounce their name. I've decided. Essentially, they have Necuno Solutions and Katie have announced a collaboration and what they're going to do is they're going to compete in the mobile space, and they're doing a really cool job with it because it's going to be a quad core. It's going to have a GPU. 5.5-inch touchscreen, aluminum body, and you guys are gonna be happy about this, a Courage jack, also known as 3.5 millimeter jack.
Oh yeah.
It features kernel 4.14, and the best part is powered by, you guessed it, KDE Plasma. KDE had this to say, open quote, "It is important that developers within the mobile ecosystem are able to work with open devices which are easy to modify and tweak and not locked to vendors to a particular operating system. Necuno Solutions is working on one such device and will ultimately help improve the Plasma Mobile due to its open source nature," close quote. There is no price on this, but the logical competitor rather in the arena is the Librem 5, and that's selling for $599 and will be released in April 2019 if everything goes according to plan. So we can guess that it'll be somewhere in that probably $5,000 to $1,000 price range. Every time we talk about mobile solutions, somebody brings up the Librem series and Librem 5, so we'll just mention that right off the bat. Librem 5, the specs are 5.7 IPS display, a 64-bit Cortex A53 CPU, 3 gigabytes of RAM. So we'll see. So I guess it looks like the price. We're guessing that the price is going to be a little bit lower than the Librem.
Yeah,
5.
it'll probably be lower. I mean, the processor that's going to be in the Librem is the iMX8, and they're using, and the Necuno is using the iMX6. The Librem 5, they considered using the iMX6, but they thought it would be too underpowered. So they weren't. Mm-hmm. That's why the delays happened really for the Librem 5 coming out, because they were going to be in January 2019, but they had to basically they had to push it back because the iMX8 wasn't ready at the time. So I think this one the Necuno one will probably come out before the Librem 5. I don't know when, but I don't think the April 2019 for the Librem 5 is going to happen, and probably later in the year, probably like the second half or maybe even the third quarter of the year.
I'm not usually a huge fan of players in the mobile sphere because I think it's a gone market. But the interesting thing is that they're teaming up with KDE Plasma Mobile, right? Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about that is you have a very established product, and you have a very established project, and you have a very established code base and a very established audience. And so they're not essentially reinventing the wheel. They're just scaling and tweaking an existing system into a different infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place for that, because a lot of us that use KDE tie our KDE experience to our Android mobile experience anyway.
Absolutely. And that's one of the best reasons I use Plasma.
Well, here's the other thing too you have to consider. So consider the fact that all of the open source effort in the mobile sphere is never wasted when a new player pops up, because they can leverage the parts that work, jettison the parts that don't work, and give it another shot. So maybe the Librem isn't the thing that sells this. Maybe the Necuno mobile isn't the thing that sells it. But one of these days, I feel like open source is going to crack that nut. And so every one of these things is an iteration and one step closer to us having a true free and open operating system on the mobile platform.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fantastic they're using. I mean, obviously I'm a fan of Plasma, so it's fantastic that they're deciding to use Plasma Mobile for this. So I will be very interested to see what the price is and see whether it's worth it or not. Because I think that I don't know if Plasma Mobile's really ready to be in a product right now. Like
last I played with it sure wasn't.
Yeah, it's kind of like it has so much potential, and I know that it will do well once they get to the point where it's like at a production ready thing. It might not be ready right now, but I am glad to see that this company is thinking about using what already exists and trying to help with that rather than trying to build their own. Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons I don't like the fact that Librem 5 is doing stuff, and that might be another reason why they're delaying, is because they're making their own interface for the phone, and that's potentially a problem, where especially when you already had stuff like Plasma Mobile or UBport's Ubuntu Touch. Like, that's a fantastic product too. Even right, I don't know if it's potentially. I mean, the Ubuntu Touch from UBports is kind of maybe production ready at that point. Like,
it's pretty darn close to it. In fact, I've been using it still to get ready for a video. But the reason why I've been taking so long to use is because I want to do everything on it. I want to see if I can do everything. And there are limitations. But it is the closest I've seen to a Linux mobile operating system that is ready to go out of the box. Now, in fairness, I haven't played with Plasma Mobile in a couple of months. I think was the last time I was playing with it. I think I showed it on this show, so you can find it on an episode. But it had all the potential and beauty of KDE that you could definitely see being leveraged appropriately. It's interesting to see something happen today with HTC, that they announced their blockchain phone, which is mostly, I think, poor timing, because all of the cryptocurrencies are in complete deep dive right now. But what was interesting about the blockchain phone is not its ability to do cold storage walleting for Bitcoin and things like that, but the fact that it was including a new version of Android OS that they released that has a bunch of security layers in it for intrusion detection and things like that with physical switches. Now, why I say this is interesting is because HTC is a major player, right? And they may not be as big as Samsung, but they're certainly Samsung's probably biggest competitor outside of Apple. So it's very interesting to see some companies making moves towards the security thing, because we've all been trying to say at the top, scream at the top of our lungs, security and privacy matters. The general consumer doesn't care. But if the companies push consumers towards that, that would be huge. And I don't know all the details behind HTC's new device and how secure it's going to be and how much of Android's infrastructure, Google's Android's infrastructure removes. But it was kind of a good sign to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty good. I mean, like HTC is definitely, they were bigger like a couple of years ago, but they're, as far as in the mobile phone market, but they are probably now in the top 3 at least, and I think it's really good. They're at least trying something different, especially adding security as one of the reasons they're doing it. So that's fantastic. But I think I look forward to trying out this phone, because if you look at the prototype designs,
very pretty.
It does look really nice. Yeah. So I think that like the Librem 5 it's kind of awkward how it looks, because it's like this weird square, whereas this Necuno thing is more like polished with like more rounded corners and stuff like that. So as far as visually looking, Necuno looks better. Hardware specs, Librem 5 probably wins, but depending on which one comes out, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with like if this space gets like a competition to be like, maybe not. They're not going to outdo Apple or Android, but maybe there could be a space for a third, and especially for the people who are security conscious and stuff like that. So, I mean,
headphone jack. Dude.
Plus headphone jack. Yeah, exactly.
Courage jack. I call it the courage jack.
Yeah.
Why do you call it that? I'm curious.
Because I can't remember who I stole it from somebody, but the reason is because it takes courage to put that jack on there these days, because it fights the Apple norm. There's this idea that we have to pull these useful features out. Well, what's so stupid? What's so stupid, Ryan, and everybody, is that you've got these phones and they say, well, we have to take the headphone jack off. Why? Well, because we need it to be waterproof and we need it to be thinner. You know what? This is already hard enough to hold. I have to put a thicker case on it just so that I can get some grip on the stupid thing.
Yep.
And you know what else I don't do? I don't dunk my phone in the sink very often. I don't bathe my phone. You know what I do time to time, occasionally, every so often, I plug a pair of headphones into it so I can listen. And I can't do that when you take my courage jack off.
You can't surf with it in your pocket then.
Oh no! Well, I'll take the inability to surf if I can take the ability to listen to stuff. You know what's funny? Here's when I remember what was the first one? Was the iPhone 8 that came out that didn't have a headphone jack?
Yeah,
no,
it had to be Apple 7 maybe.
I think it was like later than that. I think it was either the 9 or 10.
I was on a flight to Australia, Sydney, Australia. I'll never forget this. Sitting on a plane, and I see this guy doing one of these. I look at him, walk past, come back a minute later. He still do. Said, buddy, I just got to ask you, what are you doing? He's like, oh, well, I had my Apple iBuds or whatever in, but the battery died, and this doesn't have a headphone jack, so I'm listening to my Netflix or whatever it was he was listening to on like holding it up to his ear. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. No, you're wrong. You're wrong, Noah. Let me tell you why you're wrong, because you're just not accepting dongle gate. All you need is a $50 dongle, and you can put a headphone jack right on your phone.
My mistake. Why didn't you know what? I was just gonna say that guy. He should have just went over to the nearest dongle store inside of the A330 and just picked one up. I mean, how hard is that?
Exactly.
Every airplane has dongles for sale, I'm sure.
By the way, I did that. I forgot my dongle. Couldn't listen to my headphones. Went to the airport store to buy it. $55 for that little tiny dongle lightning port.
Serves you right for being a fruity user.
So you went. I take it you went to sleep instead.
No, I paid $55 and listened to my music.
Wow.
Well, there's
convenience.
That. So well, at least we have a courage jack on this.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, on to some software news. Now, this next update that's coming out shortly has been 2 years in the making, lots of volunteer work, and we're getting to the final stages now of Kodi 18 Leia. Now, what I found incredible about this particular article is not just the fact that Kodi is a great product and it works really, really well, but it's the amount of work. And some of these numbers we're going to read out now, they're like telephone numbers. It's ridiculous. Now, we've got over 9,300 commits to the project, 3,000 pull requests, over 8,600 changed lines of code, 503, 500,000 lines of code removed, and nearly 500,000 code lines added. And there's over 36 open source developers working on this. And they just made some great improvements with the ability to play DRM content, integrated Wayland support. Wow, is Wayland a thing yet? I didn't realize it was.
Zeb, how dare you?
It will be. It will
and
be.
Android and Android TV leanback suggestions. So I've used Kodi a couple of years ago, but haven't used it since. Is anybody here a Kodi aficionado? Does anybody
Kodi.
know it well?
Yeah,
Avid Kodi user.
same.
I use Kodi on the NVIDIA Shield. I tried it, liked it so much that I literally went out and bought 7 NVIDIA Shields, put them on every TV in my house, just ordered another one actually on Cyber Monday to put in my RV, and I ordered another one here for the studio, so I'm going to actually have one in here. Kodi running
Nice.
off the
Wow.
Yeah, it's just I don't have enough good things to say about Kodi. And then for the places that I want a TV, like when we go vacationing and stuff like that, I have a little Raspberry Pi that I flash with Libre Elect, use the Flirk, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, plug that into to a Raspberry Pi, and I use that as my mobile Kodi box.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean,
Nice.
So cool.
Kodi is one of the. It's okay. It's definitely the best. Like, I would say it's probably one of the best entertainment centers. Period, regardless of open source or not. But the open source part of it is what makes it amazing. And what's really cool about this is that they're working on DRM content. They haven't said exactly what types of codecs and stuff they're talking about, as far as like whether they're going to implement the Cisco DRM thing that they built, which will allow for Netflix support. If they were to do that, it would make Kodi one of the only options to even care about, because it would basically at that point support almost everything. Because like if you can already get YouTube and everything on like that, and a ton of different channels that are like add-ons for Kodi. If you had Netflix, because you can already kind of do Netflix, but it's a little wonky in order to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were able to make it like built into the platform, it would be like awesome. But what I think this is kind of ridiculous, and I am still very amused and happy for it. The Kodi. This release is trying to make work for support to the Xbox. The latest version of the Xbox will be supported with Kodi at least a little bit. There's still bugs on it, so they're working on making it so the hopefully this release will get it. But it's awesome, because if you're not aware, Kodi was originally called XBMC, or the Xbox Media Center. So it's great because they're going to essentially go back to their roots like 15 years after starting the project. And I think I don't care. I don't have an Xbox One or anything. But I think it's awesome just in the idea that if people who do have an Xbox and want to use it, they can, go back, do like a nostalgic thing, but with modern technology, modern software. And it's fantastic.
I don't think, I respectfully I don't think it's for nostalgia. I think that there is a lot of people that look down and say, well, I would use my Xbox as a media center if there was an add-on for it, if there was a way I could do that. And so I think there's, because I've met the Kodi developers, right? You want to talk about some passionate folks, man. These guys, I mean, it's weird because it's an open source product, so it doesn't cost you anything. And yet these folks, they will sell you. I mean, they could sell a popsicle to an Eskimo. I'm not kidding. I mean, these guys, they're great salesmen, and they really sell you Kodi. And I get down, I'm like, yes. Where do I? Oh, yeah, that's right. I can just download it. But no, they're really, really passionate. One of the things the developers are really passionate about is getting their product everywhere. So if you've ever seen one of their demos, one of the things that they do is they have 3 tables. So they've got 1 here and then 2 on the sides. And on the tables, they just litter it, all 3 tables, with devices that run Kodi. And they'll show you, say, well, it doesn't matter. If you're an Apple guy, we got it on Apple. If you're an Android guy, we got it on Android. If you want it on the Fire Stick, for a while, they had little portable NVIDIA Shields, little flip-up, little portable game console deals. and they would hand them out. You couldn't keep them, but they would hand them out to people. So you had people walking around their little booth area with these NVIDIA Shields, because Kodi will run on anything. Everything from a Raspberry Pi to a, how much is the Xbox One? $400 or $500 game console.
Yeah.
So there's Kodi has become the de facto standard in living room entertainment, and I'm really happy to see that again. One of those things, much like Blender, we've reached that with open source. We're just the best, and it's not a function of loyalty. It's just a function of it literally is the best product out there.
Yeah.
I love what you said about it running on everything, because one of the things that shocked me, somebody had bought me one of these Amazon Fire boxes, and I hate everything about that box, the recording and listening, all that stuff. So I was like, I don't want to really use that. I wonder if I could put Kodi on it. So sure enough, they have a side-loaded app that you basically side-load your Android device, download the APK, you send it over to the Amazon box, it reconfigures, it runs Kodi on it, and now you've got Kodi. Think about the genius it is that they can get every one of these devices, even this Amazon box that's made to consume Amazon content only, and get it to sideload Kodi and run perfectly on it, by the way. And I mean, they're so smart, man.
And it's really cool because you can, inside of the Fire Stick or Fire TV, you can actually have it where it's a channel, a part of the Fire interface, so you can just switch into Kodi or always use Kodi. So if you want to use something like it kind of makes it a best of both worlds at that point, because you can have all your local content through Kodi, and you can have like Netflix and stuff like that through the Fire TV interface. So that will make potentially not be important anymore, because with the Netflix support or the DRM content that they're talking about. But it's a nice way, because when someone asked me if they should get a Fire TV stick or whatever, and I was like, if you want to, because it is convenient and it's nice to have in some ways. And then they were just asking me, like, once they got it, like, well, how can I get this, my content? And I was like, well, I could put Kodi on there for you. And they're like, oh, what is that? I was like, you'll see. And then I just gave it to them. They're like, this is nice. and Kodi is nice. Like Kodi
looks gorgeous.
It used to have like a dated look, but the latest version of it is beautiful. Like, it is fantastic. And I'm a big fan of Kodi, and I've been using it for years. And I've also contributed to add-ons and stuff like that. There's tons of different things that Kodi's great at. So I think that if you haven't tried Kodi before, you can run it on your laptop or your desktop and just kind of like launch it that way. But if you would like to have like a set-top box, you can download an ISO or distro called Leia RC1, and it is essentially a Kodi distro that is entirely
Kodi appliance.
Yeah, it's an appliance built it is specifically a distribution made for Kodi, and I think they call it just enough operating system to run Kodi or something like that. Anyway, it's a fantastic thing. There are multiples that do that, but I think that Leia RC1 is probably the best one. So, speaking about like things that are somewhat confusing, the Mesa VLK and Pro drivers, and the Mesa and the Pro drivers, and like there's a lot of confusion around these types of drivers from AMD. And it's like which ones you should use. For example, a lot of people who are confused about whether they should use the Pro drivers or they should use the VLK drivers, they should use the Mesa drivers, and all kinds of stuff like that. And I
can't argue. I want to argue, but I can't argue.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty confusing. But typically speaking, the Mesa drivers are usually better in some cases that people have said, and also other people said for depending on what you're doing, gaming and stuff like that. The Mesa drivers are better, but other things might be better for the Pro drivers, depending on if you need that OpenCL and stuff like that.
Right.
But still super confusing because we have no idea. But thankfully, a friend of the show, Michael Larabelle at Phoronix, has benchmarked all of these different types of drivers using the RX 580, the R9 Fury, and the Vegas 64 to basically remove all the confusion about it. So that's fantastic. Have you all had a chance to look at the results?
I definitely have. I've done a video like this. I get asked on my channel about this constantly. Which driver do I use? I was confused when I first switched to AMD, like we talked about, I think last week, because I was like, where's the Pro driver I install? I'm not used to not having to install a driver. And with AMD, you don't have to. Everybody, if you look in the support forums and things, will tell your average person who's looking to do gaming or rendering or just your basic things to utilize the driver that comes with the kernel. And of course, you can sideload your Vulkan drivers in there, so you've got Vulkan support and things like that. But I really like that Phoronix did it and went through to kind of prove once and for all what's the answer. And unfortunately, it wasn't what I expected it to be. Because he actually found that the answer depends heavily on the card, which is quite a bit different than what you'll see in the support forums saying. So on some cards, it was actually better to utilize the Pro driver, and depending on the game. And in some cards, it was better to use the Mesa driver. Ultimately, I would still tell people, use the driver that comes with the kernel. You're going to be fine. You're going to have fantastic support. Look, the frames I get per second on the Vega 64 are ludicrous. I mean, it's dumb. You know, when you're at 170 200 frames per second, are you really mad that you're not at the 174 frames per second by switching? So, I mean, we're already in ludicrous land for the most part. So I would just stick there. But I thought it was interesting that there wasn't this line in the sand based on these benchmarks to say definitely use this one and definitely use this one for gaming, because he was doing mostly gaming there. On there, it actually showed there was quite a bit of difference, which goes to show again, because some people were, arguing a little bit last week about this in the YouTube comments, that I'm sorry, AMD, as much as I love them, they've got to do some work here to create some consistency.
It's interesting because there's so many things that it doesn't really matter, but at the same time, it kind of does matter. You're saying like the frames per second. So like, is it really that big of a difference? And it's kind of like, well, I paid for this, so I kind of want it regardless. And that's a lot of people.
244th frame per second
exactly.
versus
I know I can't tell the difference between the 200 and 220, but like, hey, I kind of want. I think that's a lot of people are taking that approach. But I completely agree. If like, and also in some cases, like if your monitor can't support the higher frame rates anyway, it doesn't matter. So.
Yeah, you start losing the effectiveness of it if you're sitting there with a 60 hertz monitor running at 200 frames per second. You're not really seeing it, so it's not really mattering much. But yeah, I mean, like you said, you get what you pay for and those type of things. So I just want to see. I love AMD. I love my card. By the way, the Vega 64 kills it in rendering with Lightworks, as most AMD GPUs are known for in their rendering abilities. So. I love the card. I just want to see that consistency there with them, and I think they'll get there. They're the only ones open sourcing their drivers that I know of at this point, besides Intel, which may be another player in there that's going to push, because they're supposed to have a GPU as well, which is pretty cool. So speaking of, if you're thinking about getting your loved one a gift, Vega 64 would be one heck of a nice gift. But we wanted to do a little segment. I thought this would be fun for everybody to go around and talk about some gifts for Linux loved ones, because this is the season, right? We're going to go out there, and this is a time where you want to mark this. If you're listening to the podcast, you're watching the YouTube video, this is the time to mark this time that we're starting to talk about this and send it to your spouse to make sure you get a good gift and not some stupid tie or something like that, right? So we're going to talk about the top gifts for Linux loved one, for your loved ones that are also in Linux right now. And so there was an article out here that had some suggestions. Michael, do you like any of the suggestions this article gave, or are you going to come out with your own?
I'm definitely going to come up with my own, but we can make our own list if we wanted to. But I think that some of these are pretty good options, because like the Raspberry Pi 3, like they're talking about the Model A Plus. I think that's a good option, but any of the Raspberry Pis, Raspberry Pi 3s, those are like totally worth it, and they're a fantastic gift, and any geek would love that, regardless of like their.
If they don't like it, they're not a real geek. Your spouse is an imposter.
That's true. I also like the fact that they have these. They have a couple like stuffed animals that are both a Tux Penguin and a GNU, or a GNU technically, but they're promoting it like a GNU. So I think that's kind of funny. But overall, I think most of these are kind of like, just tossing stuff in so they get a certain amount of numbers, like cufflinks. I mean,
Yes.
What? I don't care.
Well,
like,
even Unix stickers, really.
Yeah, I mean stickers. I like stickers sometimes, but
for a gift though.
Okay,
there
that's
goes
true.
my
Like
gift
Christmas.
idea for you, Noah.
It is kind of a weird gift, but also cufflinks is like, I mean, most people don't even wear cufflinks anymore, but like, anyway, things like that it seems like they're just kind of like padding it for the numbers, but there are a couple things in there.
External HD, yeah, that's a external hard drive. That's a Linux specific gift right there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So my go-to gifts, I agree with the Raspberry Pi 3. I also am a big fan of YubiKeys for Linux people when I'm looking for gifts.
Yeah.
That's how you hand them a YubiKey and say, hey, you know what? That's something that what I found is it's something that every Linux user wants. Many of them don't want to spend their own money on it, partly because they don't know how great it is. But then the other part is that they just look at it and they're like, yeah, $65 to $65, they won't do it.
That's a good one.
That's kind of my go-to. And they did include the LibreKey, which wouldn't be a bad idea to go, bad route to go either.
Yeah, the LibreKey is pretty cool too. And the YubiKey has, like the latest YubiKey 5 has the NFC support built into it. So that's really cool. So you can have it to like not only to get access to your servers and your computers, but also your phone and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. But I think some of these things are kind of like, yeah, okay. But the Steam gift card, that's always helpful, regardless if it's a Linux or not. But like, you know, everybody, any gamer would love to have a Steam gift card.
Except Noah. Noah would be like, "Why did you send me this gamer gift card?"
I said any gamer.
Listen. I have to open the locks. You know, if the lock is jammed, I've got to stick a card in there. I don't want to use one of my credit cards that it's actually useful to me. So what else do I use? Steam gift card, obviously. Duh.
Obviously. But there are many things. I think one of the things that was on here that was actually like kind of cool was the Linux cheat sheet T-shirt, because it's basically
so cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Just a bunch of for those who haven't seen it, it's just a bunch of like commands for the Linux terminal, but they're written upside down on the shirt so that you look down and see what the like there's like a reference point. Like I think that's kind of funny.
Genius, man.
Yeah. But I think that also like there should be other things like perhaps like the This Week in Linux T-shirt is a good option for a gift.
Come on. No. Destination Linux patron. It's darn near free, and you could give it as a gift to somebody.
Yeah, but Linux is everywhere. Everybody knows that. Linux is everywhere. So I think that there's Patreon is a good option too. You can pay $12 and you get a whole year to someone. That's a great option for them.
Right.
All kinds of stuff.
Or I think a great option, honestly, would be a donation to somebody's favorite distro or application as well. So if you've got a friend in the open source community, they love a certain distro or application, you could, get a donation to that distro or app on their behalf would be kind of a cool idea. Yep. But I'm a big fan of headphones. I think headphones are one of the most underrated gifts out there, mostly because people don't know what sound they're missing. They get these Apple iPhones or whatever headphones come with their phones.
I agree. Headphones are the best.
Yeah, and they don't know quality sound. But once you go into an audiophile quality like headphone, an AKG, a Sennheiser, a Focal, Audio-Technica, it will change your life. And music can calm you. It can, it can play podcasts like this and better quality sound.
The best.
But it's just something you really do end up enjoying a lot. And most people, like Noah was talking about, people don't spend money on themselves for things like the YubiKey. Headphones, people do the same thing. They go in the store, they're like, I'll get the $15, headphones. And you're missing out on so much by not spending that extra money. So giving someone headphones, good gift.
I agree. I mean, that's.
And also, let's not forget as well, it's a good gift for your pet, because they can sit there chewing through the cables.
In my case, I have reinforced cables just for such a situation. Yep.
Nice.
Well, Zeb, we've got a special article cooked up just for you in our gaming section. I've been excited all week to hear you talk about this.
Well, funny you should say that, because this week Ryan has plummeted to new depths. Okay. I am almost lost for words. However, I had a day off work today, and in my stupidity, I decided to give a couple of these games a go. All right.
What's the category for these games, Eb?
There's at least 2 pixels.
In the immortal words of English Bob, okay, and this will be PG friendly, yeah. I would rather pierce my eyelids with red hot needles than subject myself to playing these games again. Okay.
What?
Yeah. And to make it worse, any minute now, Ryan's going to say, "Oh, come on, Zeb. These games are classics. Just don't get it, dude."
That was a great impression of Brian. I'm not.
It was,
less British, but
let me tell you.
Oh my god!
There is nothing to get. Okay. Now my favourite was some sort of dune buggy lander jumping thing. So you had a nice terminal window. Now I've got to describe this because the graphics are just stunning. You had your terminal window. Then you had a row of, whether you want to call them pipes or exclamation marks, scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And this was your moon landing, yeah? And every now and again, someone had obviously, they've got a sticky key or something, because some of these little exclamation marks were missing. And they were meant to be depicting craters, right? I think. And then you had, I think it was a total of about five squares and a couple of rectangles, which denoted your moon landing. And then I had to read it, and I had to read it off of 4 different websites because the controls were really confusing. Yeah,
it's hieroglyphic gaming. That's what it is.
It was just like, it was spacebar to move, and then the up arrow to jump. So you're sitting there watching the screen, you're going. And I tell you what, it's a bit like taking a multiple choice test that I used to do at school with a packet of Smarties. I don't know what you call them over there, but they're multicolored sweets. Yeah. So red was A, green was B, blue was C. So I actually sat there at one game and closed my eyes and just kept hitting the up arrow. If I didn't get my highest score by not looking at the screen, I mean, come on. I mean, they even had, I think they called it Ninja Invaders, an old Space Invaders game. And the rest were just inexplicable. Just, you know.
Zeb, what are you talking about? These games are incredible.
You just don't get it.
Well,
how can you not like hieroglyphic gaming?
Yeah.
Sounds incredible.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting the most out of your NVIDIA graphics card when you're playing games like this. You know why? Because the programmers never intended for you to use it like that. And therefore, if it can run it, you're golden, man. Yeah.
Just shocking.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, this is the articles that I was talking about is that I gave them as best ASCII games that are good. And the ASCII games here are said to be insanely fun to play here, according to the article, Zeb. And I thought, well, my friend Zeb would love this. It was, and some of the top ones were Curse of War. Yeah, and ASCII Sector, Doom RL, which is an ASCII version of Doom. How could you not like that?
I mean, that's awesome.
Well, what was really scary was that on Doom RL, the faces of the monsters were made up of like 54 straight lines instead of just 4 for the hero. Really?
I didn't even play any of these stupid games. Are you kidding me?
Wow.
I looked at this list and just laughed and laughed and laughed and made sure your name was there, Zeb. But thank you for trying them out for us, man. All right, Michael, give us another game that, honestly, I laughed at this one because what the heck?
Yeah, I laughed at when I looked at this when I first saw about it. I was like, okay then. Sluggish Morse, I guess, is a claymation, a 2D claymation adventure game. The 2D part is like it's claymation, so it's like a 2D scroller platformer type game. But it has all the art is claymation based, which is really interesting and really funky looking too.
It's so weird.
Yeah, I can't really describe anything that's in the screen. Like if you watch the video, it's like I don't know what this is. I don't know what like any of this is. Okay. There's a setting. There's a character walking around. I don't know what it's supposed to look like or what it's supposed to be, but like it's there. So I think it's interesting, and I'm glad to see that there's games that are like people are stretching the limits of like what is possible. But this might be too much of a stretch.
Well, you know why I put this in there? Because this was the game I was going to troll with Zeb first. But then what I noticed
you found something better.
I found something better with the ASCII games. But then what happened is I noticed that Liam on Gaming on Linux talked about how much he loves these type of games. And I thought, well, maybe there is something here in this. But it's very bizarre even the video where they're explaining it has like one of those poorly holographic versions of the developer telling you about the game. And then there's all of this trippy stuff going on all over the place. But yeah, I'm proud of you, Michael, there's a Kickstarter out there if you're interested in pledging towards it. But I'm proud of you for finding some positives to say about the video. That, my sir, is talent.
There you go. I mean, it is interesting that they're using claymation to make a video game.
It's not the first time that's been done, but yeah, okay.
I mean, I'm not saying it's first. It's just
Let's
interesting.
hope it's the last.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's a cool game, but the video that they have explaining it is just too weird to really figure out. So we'll have to see if they're when they release the game there. But now it's time for the software spotlight in there, and I wanted to spotlight Synfig. Is that how you pronounce it, Michael?
I don't know. I would guess.
Okay, well,
sounds about right.
As Noah said, I declare now it's Synfig, and now they know how to pronounce their own product correctly. It's a 2D animation software. I've actually used this off and on several times for different projects throughout, especially when I first was kicking off on Linux and was doing some vector graphics and things like that. But it's an open source 2D animation software. So if you get into Blender and you're like, listen, I just need to do something simple, some vector tweening, some shaping, and add some basically 2D animating software that's not over the top, this may be a quick fill-in until you get your courses in for the Blender and those type of things. But it's a very cool system that has features like the full bone system to control the characters. If you ever done animation with the art, having the bone structure available is the difference between having realistic walking and movement of your characters and not. So it's a very important thing to have in there for your 2D animations. And if you go on their website, the stuff people have done with this tool, I was like embarrassed that I ever even used it when I looked at some of the stuff other people were doing. Oh my gosh. So have any of you guys used Synfig before?
I've used things like it, but I haven't used this one in particular. But it does sound like something that is very useful for any kind of like video intros and stuff like that, because a lot of animations could be done in a 2D form and then like converted into like 3D modeling and stuff like that. I think this has a lot of potential.
Yep. So something to go check out there if you're interested in finding software for that. So Noah, what's our tip and trick of the week, sir?
You know, the tip and trick of the week is one of the first things we all learn to do when we start using Linux, especially when we get to the command line, is we learn how to copy files. Now, we all know that the command is CP, but what separates the kitchen ninjas from the true samurais are knowing what all those little switches, command line switches after the TAC, what they actually do. So we've got a couple of them for you this week. TAC I, or the -I, is confirm before overriding. TAC N is no overriding, doesn't allow it at all. And TAC B is overriding with backup. So an example of that might be copy TAC B, source directory, space, target directory. That's going to overwrite the file if the target directory exists, but it creates a backup file. So when you screw it up, you can recover your files and you're not totally hosed.
Yeah, I have to be very careful when I use CP when I'm doing stuff, because I'll actually create a bunch of bash scripts, and then I'll have to remember if I've already put it into the user bin or not, and then I'll have to like sudo CP into it and like send it in, and then sometimes I'll forget, I got to overwrite this. Okay. Like sometimes
I didn't know about backup. I didn't know about the switch -B. That was like, where has this been my whole life? The -B.
Truth be told, the vast majority of system administrators will tarball up whatever directory that they're going to do some work on. If it's a production system, they'll tarball that up and throw it aside, and then they do their actual work. I've not actually ever seen TAC B used in production. But personally, but that doesn't necessarily mean now there's going to be 1,000 people that write in and go, Noah's a dumb system administrator. We all use it.
It's possible. It's possible. I have used the TAC I a lot because it's just to make sure that if it is something there. But it's like there's a lot of different things like this, like the CP and the RM that are like very useful, but you have to make sure you use the right flags so that you don't mess things up. I'm gonna add one in here too. TAC R, recursive. One of the I think anytime I use copy, one of the most useful switches that I use is TAC R, which will not only copy the directory itself, but it will copy any subdirectories that are in there and all of their associated. So TAC R, throw that in there. That's a good one.
Yep.
Hey guys, episode 100 of Destination Linux. We're excited. It's going to be a huge celebration, but it's going to be postponed just a little bit because Michael didn't plan correctly to accommodate a guy who has to pick up his life and move. So episode 100 is actually going to be live December 14th. So it's not going to be next week. That'll be the week after, but make sure you stay up to date on all of our social media and for upcoming announcements. By the way, if you're participating in just the show and you're not following us on social media, then you're only getting half the party. Patreon.com/Destination Linux for less than the price. I'm trying to think, less than $1 value menu fries at McDonald's.
Yeah,
you can
it's
get
actually more than $1.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So you can get your weekly Linux content, and you can support our show and make sure that we don't starve to death, because then we can eat the $1 menu
So
fries.
hungry.
I know. Exactly. Destination or teespring.com/Destination Linux. You can show your Destination Linux swag and your approval of us. Show us off to your friends. Not to mention, we're going to take even the geekiest nerd and make him look sexy. So you can find that at teespring.com/Destination Linux. And of course, you should check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Destination Linux. There, like I say, you'll get the full party and can participate 100%. You can find Ryan at youtube.com/DosGeek. Zeb is youtube.com/ZebDBoss.
Zebedee
And
Boss.
of course, Mike,
Yeah.
Zebedee Boss. that man that rolls off the tongue once you get it. And Michael, of course, tuxdigital.com. My show, the Ask Noah Show, is a weekly talk show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com. I'll take your Linux questions. I'll answer them and do my level best not to screw it up.
Well, we want to say a huge thank you for all of the incredible support, for watching, listening to Destination Linux. Of course, we've had a tremendous amount of support and growth because I started talking more, or maybe because Noah joined. One or two things happened. I'm not sure.
Could be one of the three there.
Yeah, one of the three. But we've had a huge amount of support,
Let's just
and
say
we
it's a
appreciate
combination.
it very much. Yeah, definitely. And Zeb, how can people get a hold of us?
Well, they can contact us at comments@destinationlinux.org. And as we say every week, we really do like to read your comments, and sometimes we struggle just to decide which one we're actually going to be putting in the show. So keep your comments and suggestions coming, how you use Linux, and maybe any hints and tips, so that we can listen less to Ryan and more to the rest of us. So that'll always be cool. And if you want to contact us, you can also get us on our social media channels, and that includes Telegram, Discord, Google+, Twitter, and Mastodon. And I'm sure there's a whole plethora of other items out there, and that's available at destinationlinux.org/contact. So, Michael, what do they need to do every week?
You need to keep liking that smash button. And yeah, as Zeb said, you need to share the show on social media. And again, also check out our individual channels, because we all do separate content that is just as compelling as this show. So definitely check it out. And if you aren't,
I wouldn't say just as compelling as
I was going to say maybe digital is just as compelling, but I would say
my stuff.
I was being generous to everybody. Okay, I mean,
well, now you've been corrected.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
But so anyway, if you'd like to join watch the show live and experience the full content, you can, as Noah said, you can join the Patreon and become a patron with patreon.com/Destination Linux.
Hey, everybody, have a great week, and remember that the journey is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Zeb.
Yeah.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday.